So give us a sense of where we are in terms of escalation, de-escalation risk at the moment across America. Good morning.
Good morning, good evening from California. I guess much of what you've just described is actually intensified as we've gone later into the evening. In cities like Boston and Denver, which had largely peaceful protests throughout the day, as you've entered the evening, many of these cities have curfews in place, meaning that anyone that's on the street is in contravention of that curfew. And we're seeing clashes between police and protesters. In Washington, the nation's capital, fires have been started in the last couple of hours in very close proximity to the White House. There are continued clashes in Lafayette Park in Washington. But I guess it's also important to note that across the weekend and including today, there were plenty of peaceful protests which police officers and police forces participated in. But really, the overall direction of this has been an escalation since Friday when Derek Chauvin, the Minneapolis police officer, as you described, who had his knee on the neck of George Floyd for 9 minutes. He was arrested on Friday and charged with third-degree murder and manslaughter. And that's really the direction that this has taken over the course of the weekend.
Ed, it's Emery from New York. Thanks for joining us. We've seen different responses over the course of the weekend from the president. What's the latest from President Donald Trump?
So the president's kind of really positioned himself as this voice of law and order, and we actually haven't heard from him today in terms of a televised address or anything like that. He's largely resorted to Twitter, a mechanism that he's used throughout his presidency, where he attributes the violence and kind of the scenes in the images that you guys have put up to kind of radical left-wing groups, Antifa, which is kind of an abbreviation of anti-fascist, this kind of loose organization of activists that have no formal structure. He's taken to Twitter to say that he will, mark them as a terrorist organization, which has sort of raised legal questions because they are not a formal body. They have no hierarchy, no leadership per se. They're sort of a loosely affiliated group of localized units. We did hear from him yesterday at the SpaceX launch in Florida, where he labeled what we're seeing as mob violence. Prior to that, on Air Force One, he issued a statement saying that he would use the unlimited power of the U.S. military on demonstrators. He has basically called on state governors and state officials to accept the help of National Guard, and there are multiple reports of the National Guard being deployed throughout the country. But we know that tomorrow or Monday, the president will meet with the Attorney General, William Barr. He's also going to host a video conference with state governor and law enforcement officials. But, other than that, we're waiting on sort of a unified federal response to this.
I am looking at Twitter this morning, and I'm looking at two of the biggest global brands in the world tweeting and retweeting one another. Nike has their tweet, "Let's all be part of it." You then have Adidas retweeting this. The voices of corporate America are shifting. Give us the tone and the intonation of corporate America, and where is it most present?
Yeah, so Nike, they moved early. They put that tweet out on Friday. It's basically a message, that you should be vocal in your opposition to what is going on in terms of, anything that is unjust. Starbucks' CEO, Kevin Johnson, published a letter today, an open letter to his workers. Yesterday, Starbucks kind of hosted this open forum where, they're talking about the need to be kind of vocal and have uncomfortable and courageous conversations around what's happening. The Citigroup CFO, Mark Mason, made a very personal blog post yesterday where he basically outlines that, even for him as the CFO of a big global bank, being a Black American is difficult. And he kind of outlined that. But the real corporate America point, the overall economic point here, is that this could not come at a worse time. I follow the retail industry. I follow U.S. restaurant industry. And April was a disaster. Sales went off a cliff last month and in the first quarter. And the hope was that over the course of the next 2 weeks in early June, we would see the pace of reopening in some states actually accelerate, The concern now is that this will have a direct effect where officials will not allow the economy to reopen as fast. There will be curfews in place for longer as a direct response to the violence. And then from the public health official side, there's, of course, a concern that all of these protesters and demonstrators are in close proximity to one another, and that brings a risk that we will see a spike of new coronavirus cases throughout the country that is difficult to control. You see images, people wearing masks, but there are so many people.
Indeed,
in
it's
such
going to be tough.
confined
It's
space.
going to be tough to keep a handle on those.